Most people are busy, but busy doesn't mean better. We fill our calendars, chase deadlines, juggle responsibilities, and yet, despite all the movement, we often feel stuck. Why is that? It's because motion isn't meaning. We think we're making progress, but we've confused speed with direction. We're spinning faster and faster in circles, mistaking the blur for momentum. But the truth is, without meaning behind our motion, we are just moving in place. Busy, but not becoming living. With purpose isn't about doing more, it's about doing the right things for the right reasons. It's not about waking up earlier, hustling harder, or checking more boxes. It's about waking up with clarity. It's about understanding the reason why you're doing what you're doing. And that reason has to be bigger than money, bigger than validation, bigger than comparison. It has to be rooted in something that lasts when applause fades. And when the spotlight moves on, that's when purpose starts to emerge. Not in the noise, but in the quiet conviction of knowing why you move at all. Purpose is what separates exhaustion from fulfillment. Two people can work equally hard. One ends the day drained, the other ends it. Inspired, the difference. One was moving, the other was moving towards something. We need to stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, why? Does this matter? When you lead with meaning? The what becomes clear, the how becomes creative, but the why, that's the compass. It's the North Star that keeps your life alive. We're taught from an early age to chase goals, graduate, get a job, climb the ladder, buy the house, earn the respect, and it works for a while until you hit the point where achievement starts to feel hollow. You've reached the summit, but the view isn't what you thought it would be. That's when it hits you. Goals without purpose are just distractions in disguise. They keep you busy, but they never fill you. And if you're not careful, you can spend an entire life building something impressive to the world, but empty to yourself. To live with power, you have to know what fuels you, and it's not external validation, not fame, not the size of your audience or the title on your LinkedIn profile. Power comes from alignment. When your actions match your values, when your goals align with your deeper beliefs, you become unstoppable. You don't have to push anymore. You're pulled. That's what happens when you lead with meaning. Purpose becomes magnetic. It attracts clarity, energy, and courage. But here's the hard truth. Finding your purpose won't come from scrolling. It won't come from copying someone else's path. It won't come from reading quotes or waiting for inspiration to strike. It comes from doing the deep, sometimes uncomfortable work of asking better questions. What am I pretending not to know? What am I afraid to admit about what I really want? What would I do if no one clapped for me? That's where the search begins. Outside of you, inside, that's where meaning lives, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows of your own honesty. It's easy to get caught in the noise we live in, a world that rewards the loud, the flashy, the fast, but real power, the kind that doesn't burn out, comes from stillness, from being grounded, from knowing that your worth is not attached to your results, your likes, or your income. When you find meaning in what you do, the world doesn't have to approve. You're not chasing applause, you're chasing alignment. And ironically, the more aligned you become, the more naturally impact follows, not because you're trying to impress, but because people are drawn to those who are rooted. Every purposeful person I've ever met shares one thing in common. They move slowly when it matters, not because they lack urgency, but because they refuse to trade depth for speed. They say no, off. They're not afraid to pause. They're not addicted to motion. They know that busyness can be the enemy of brilliance. So they choose meaning over movement, intention over instinct, depth, distraction. Living with purpose isn't about having all the answers. It's about refusing to ignore the questions. It's about living in a way that makes sense to you, even if it doesn't make sense to others, because at the end of the day, no one else can define what a meaningful life looks like for you. That's your work, that's your responsibility, and it's also your privilege. The power to choose what matters to you and to shape your life around that is the ultimate freedom. This is not a motivational slogan. It's not a one-time decision. It's a daily commitment to stop hiding, to drifting, to stop outsourcing your sense of meaning to people who don't have to live your life. You will never find purpose if you're living someone else's plan. Power comes the moment you take ownership, not of your outcomes, but of your intention. That's the real shift, not from doing less or doing more, but from doing what matters. When you begin to move with meaning, people will notice, not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. Your presence will speak before you. Your actions will resonate deeper, and the right people, those who align with your values, vision, your why, they will be drawn to you. Because purpose isn't just about what you get from life. It's about what you give, and the most powerful life is the one that's built in service of something greater than yourself. You don't have to be perfect to live with purpose. You just have to be honest. You don't need a map. You just need a compass, and if you lead with meaning, not noise, not motion, not metrics, you will begin to move in the direction that actually matters. Not faster, but forward. Not louder, but truer. And that's the real power. The kind no one can take away. Most people are searching for purpose, like it's a destination somewhere to arrive, something to uncover. But what if purpose isn't something we find, but something we remember, something that's already inside us, quietly waiting behind the noise, the pressure, the expectations? The truth is the life we're meant to live is often hidden underneath the story we've been trying to forget. The moments we dismissed the setbacks, we ignored the pain, we buried those on detours, their blueprints. Every person you admire didn't stumble into their purpose, reclaimed it. They looked back before they looked ahead. They connected the dots between where they've been and who they've become. Because your past isn't the thing holding you back, it's the thing that qualifies you to lead forward. But only if you're willing to look at it honestly, not as a weight, but as wisdom. Your story matters, even the parts you'd rather skip over. Especially those parts, the heartbreaks, the failures, the moments when you thought it was over. Those chapters aren't shameful. They're sacred. They shaped your values. They taught you what matters. And if you're willing to stop hiding from them, they can become the foundation of your future. There's nothing more powerful than a person who has made peace with their past. Because once your story no longer controls you, you can begin to use it to serve others. We all crave authenticity, but most of us are afraid to start with our own. We think people want the polished version of us, the curated one, the version that's always strong, always certain, successful, but the people who make the deepest impact are the ones who lead with truth. They don't pretend to have it all together. They don't perform. They show up as they are, and because of that, others feel safe to do the same. That's the paradox of leadership. It's not about strength, it's about sincerity. Not about knowing everything, but about being willing to be known when you embrace your story. You stop competing, you stop comparing, you stop needing to prove anything because you understand that no one else has lived what you've lived. Experience is your lessons, your pain, your victories. They all form a fingerprint that no one else can replicate. That's your edge, that's your advantage, not the degrees, not the job title, not the resume hits your perspective, and no one can take that from you. But too many of us spend our lives trying to edit our story instead of living it. We want to skip chapters, rewrite scenes, hide the plot twists. But when we do that, we rob the world of the version of us that was shaped by resilience, and we rob ourselves of the chance to lead from the deepest place of power. Experience the world doesn't need perfect people. It needs real ones. People who are willing to say, here's where I've been, here's what I've learned, and here's how I want to help. Because purpose isn't about arrival, it's about service. It's not about status, it's about contribution. And you can't contribute fully if you're hiding the very things that made you who you are. Your story isn't just for you, it's for someone else who hasn't made it through yet. Someone who needs proof that survival is possible. Transformation is possible, that purpose can come from the parts you once thought were worth, and yet we often wait. We wait for clarity, we wait for permission, we wait for the perfect moment to finally start showing up as the person we were meant to be. But that moment isn't coming. Purpose doesn't arrive in lightning bolts. It shows up in small acts of courage, the courage to be seen, the courage to tell the truth, the courage to live in alignment with who you are instead of who you think you're supposed to be. There is nothing more liberating than realizing you don't need to become someone else to live with purpose. You just need to become more of yourself. The version of you that's been underneath all the masks, the version of you that's raw, flawed, but deeply real. And when you show up from that place, everything changes. Your voice becomes stronger, your work becomes meaningful because you're no longer chasing validation. You're standing in truth. Purpose is not passive. It doesn't arrive while you're scrolling. It doesn't grow while you're pretending. It demands honesty. It requires that you stop apologizing for your story, that you stop minimizing your journey, that you start seeing it for what it is, not a liability, but a legacy. Because the most impactful leaders, creators, and visionaries didn't hide from their past. They honored it, they integrated it, and then they used it to build something that served others. If you want to live with power, you have to start by owning your path, not just the shiny moments. The whole thing, because power comes from congruence, from the alignment between what you say and who you are, between what you believe and how you show up. People feel it when you're real. They trust it, they lean in, and that's when your presence starts to shift things. Not because you're the loudest voice in the room, but because you're the clearest. So don't underestimate your story. Don't rush past it. Don't water it down. Instead, ask yourself, what have I lived through that others are still facing? What truth have I learned the hard way that I can now give freely? What parts of my journey, if shared, might unlock freedom for someone else? Because when you begin to answer those questions, your purpose stops being a mystery. It becomes obvious, and the more you live from that place, the more powerful your life becomes. Not in a way that shouts, but in a way that resonates, not in a way that impresses, but in a way that transforms. You were never meant to live a borrowed life. You were meant to live a story that only you could write. And the sooner you stop editing yourself for the comfort of others, the sooner you begin to live with purpose, not the kind that fades when things get hard, but the kind that endures, the kind that gives you strength when no one's watching, the kind that says, I know why I'm here, and that knowing that's your true power. We're wired to seek comfort. It's human. Crave safety, predictability, and ease. But purpose doesn't live there. Power doesn't grow. They're, in fact, the very things we're working so hard to avoid. Discomfort, challenge, uncertainty are often the only things that move us closer to who we're meant to be. That's the paradox of growth. We think we need to protect ourselves from pain, but the truth is the pain we avoid is often the exact teacher we need. When you choose comfort, you get what's familiar. When you choose growth, you get what's possible. But possibility doesn't come easy. It demands something. It asks you to let go of who you've been so you can become who you could be. That's not comfortable. That's not safe. But that's the price of a life that matters. The people we admire most, the ones who live with unshakable purpose and quiet strength, didn't get there by accident. They got there because over and over again they chose growth over comfort. It's a day decision to lean in, when it would be easier to pull back, to speak up, when silence feels safer, to risk failure. When success isn't guaranteed, growth requires that we get honest about what's holding us back, not just externally but internally. The stories we tell ourselves, doubts we entertain, the excuses we rehearse. They're all designed to keep us comfortable, but they also keep us small. There's a kind of power that comes when you realize you've outgrown your excuses. When you stop waiting for ideal conditions. When you stop telling yourself that you're not ready, not good enough, not qualified. Growth isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose. It's not the result of luck. It's the result of intention, of refusing to stay where it's easy, of stepping forward, even when the next step is unclear. Most people wait. They wait for clarity. They wait for the fear to go away. They wait until they feel ready. But here's the truth. Ready is a myth. No one ever feels fully ready. The people who do great things don't wait until they're fearless. They learn to move in spite of fear. That's the difference. They understand that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision of fear. Seeing them as invitations, every difficult conversation, every rejection, every obstacle, it becomes an opportunity to become more resilient, more focused, more grounded. Power comes from your willingness to go through what others run from. Not because you enjoy the pain, but because you trust the process. The most purposeful people I know have one thing in common. They don't flinch when things get hard. They don't see hardship as a sign to stop. They see it as a test of alignment. Am I still committed to what I said I wanted? Am I still moving toward who I said I wanted to become? Growth forces us to answer those questions with our actions, not just our words. And the moment you keep going, not because it's easy, but because it's right, you begin to access a different kind of power, the kind that can't be shaken by circumstances, the kind that doesn't depend on motivation or mood, the kind that's rooted in conviction. But here's the catch. Growth is lonely at times. Not everyone will understand your decisions. Not everyone will support your path. Some will question your timing, your judgment, even your sanity. That's okay. Growth often requires you to leave the crowd, to walk paths that others avoid, to risk misunderstanding in order to stay true to yourself. And in those moments, you have to ask yourself, am I more committed to my comfort or my calling purpose? Doesn't emerge when life is easy. It's revealed in fire, and moments when quitting seems rational, in the days when progress feels invisible, in the seasons when no one's clapping and you have to become your own source of belief. That's where strength is built, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows, in the silence, in the struggle. And if you can stay the course there, you'll discover a kind of clarity that no comfort zone can offer. People often ask, how do I know if I'm on the right path? The answer is simpler than we think. You're on the right path when the growth it requires stretches you but doesn't break you. When the struggle is real, but so is the sense of meaning when you're uncomfortable, but also deeply alive. That tension, that pull, that ache, that's the sign that you're not just existing, but evolving. There's no shortcut to purpose, no fast track to power, just a series of daily choices, small, often invisible decisions to show up, to try again, to keep growing. When it would be easier to stay still, and those choices over time shape the Fez you become, because growth doesn't just change your results. It changes your identity. The more you lean into it, the more you begin to see yourself differently. Not as someone who merely survives challenges, but as someone who transforms through them. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the fear to leave. Don't wait for the conditions to be perfect. Start where you are. Choose the next brave step. Embrace the discomfort. And remind yourself that growth is a sign you're doing it right, not a sign you're doing it wrong. You don't have to change everything at once. You just have to refuse to stay the same, because every time you choose growth over comfort, you're not just moving forward, becoming the kind of person who leads with courage, who lives with conviction, and who shows others what's possible. When you stop settling for easy and start striving for meaningful, that's what living with purpose looks like. That's what true power feels like. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of progress. Not the comfort of certainty, but the strength of alignment. And the moment you decide that your future matters more than your fear, that's the moment your real life begins. We live in a world obsessed with influence. Everyone wants to be heard, followed, admired. But somewhere along the way, we've confused visibility with value. Influence isn't about how many people are watching you. It's about what they see when they do. And real power, the kind that lasts, doesn't come from grabbing attention. It comes from first, it comes from showing up not to be seen, but to see others, to understand, to help, to lead from behind, not just from out front. There's something profoundly magnetic about a person who lives to serve, not in a weak way, not in a passive way, but in a way that says, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to support you. That kind of presence changes the room. It shifts the energy because people can feel the difference between someone who's here for themselves and someone who's here for something bigger. And that difference, it matters more than we think. We've been sold the idea that power comes from being in control, from having the answers, from always leading the charge. But the most influential people aren't the loudest. They're the most aligned. They don't need to dominate the space. They create space for others to rise, for ideas to breathe, for truth to be heard. And that only happens when you approach leadership, not as a responsibility, a chance to lift others while you climb. If you want to live with purpose and power, start by asking, who am I here for? Who benefits from me showing up today? Who gets better because I chose to lead with integrity? Because when your life is centered around contribution, not just achievement, you begin to unlock a whole new level of strength, a kind that doesn't need applause to feel fulfilled, a kind that doesn't burn out because it's fueled by meaning, not ego, and the beauty is service. Doesn't require a stage. You don't need a platform to make an impact. You just need intention. You need the courage to look beyond your own goals and ask, how can I help someone else reach theirs? You need the humility to listen more than you speak, to give more than you take, because true leadership isn't about being in charge. It's about being accountable to the people you serve, accountable to the purpose you've chosen, accountable to the values that guide your decisions, especially when no one's watching. There's a reason the greatest leaders are often the most grounded. It's not because they have fewer responsibilities. It's because they've anchored themselves in something deeper than recognition. They understand that service isn't what you do after you've succeeded. It's how you succeed in the first place. It's the foundation, not the afterthought. Once you build your life on that foundation, your influence expands, not because you chase it, but because people trust it. Trust is the currency of influence, and trust is earned, not through perfection, but through consistency, through moments when you could have chosen yourself, but you chose others. You could have stayed silent, but you spoke up when you had the opportunity to walk away, but you stayed and helped carry the weight. That's where trust is born, in the small, quiet acts of service that often go unseen, but over time, they compound. They build character, they build legacy. The people who make the biggest difference rarely have to declare it. They don't tell the world they're leaders. They just lead, they show up, they follow through, they treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO. They stay last, listen first, and take responsibility. When things go wrong, that kind of presence is rare, but it's powerful, and it's available to anyone who's willing to put others first. Not as a tactic, but as a way of life. We talk a lot about finding our voice, but maybe the real question is, what are we using it for? Influence. It's a platform, and the moment you use it to elevate someone else, to empower someone who's overlooked, to speak truth in the face of fear, that's the moment you become a force for something greater than yourself. That's when your purpose stops being theoretical and starts becoming transformational. Living a life of service doesn't mean neglecting yourself. It doesn't mean saying yes to everyone or burning out to prove your worth. It means leading with intention. It means recognizing that your gifts, your resources, your time, they're not just for your own success. They're tools to build something bigger. They're a means to impact, not just income. And when you begin to see life that way, everything changes. You stop chasing success and start creating significant. Service also requires, because to serve well, you have to let go of control. You have to trust people. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. And in a world that tells us to protect, to perform, to present a perfect image, that kind of openness feels risky, but that's what makes it real. People don't connect with perfection. They connect with presence, with someone who sees them, hears them, believes in them, even when they don't believe in themselves. Yet the irony is, the more we focus on serving others, the more we grow ourselves. Not in an obvious way, but in the way we think, the way we relate, the way we lead. Service deepens our empathy, it sharpens our perspective, it grounds us in what really matters, and it reminds us that leadership isn't about climbing the ladder, it's about holding it steady for someone else. Purpose and power are not found at the top. They're found at the foundation, in the decisions you make when no one's watching, in the way you treat people who can do nothing for you, in the quiet, consistent commitment to something greater than your own gain. That's where legacy is born. That's where meaning is made. So if you want to live a life that matters, start with service. Start by asking what you can give, not what you can get. Start by leading from behind, by lifting others up, by choosing responsibility over recognition. Because the people who live with the most power are not the ones who demand attention. They're the ones who deserve it, not through performance, through presence, through purpose, through the daily decision to make their life about more than themselves. That's how influence is earned. That's how power is built. That's how purpose is lived, not by standing above others, but by standing beside them. And when you live that way, you don't just lead. You inspire, you don't just succeed. You serve, and that quietly, steadily, unmistakably is what changes everything. We don't drift into the life we want. We design it every day, whether we realize it or not. We are making choices that shape our future. The question is not whether we're designing our life. The question is whether we're doing it on purpose. Because if we're not deliberate, we default. And when we default, we repeat, we fall into the same patterns, the same routines, the same versions of ourselves that feel familiar but not fulfilling. Purposeful living doesn't happen by accident. It begins with intention, with the willingness to step back and ask, what kind of life am I building? Not just what am I achieving, but who am I becoming? It's easy to be busy, easy to be efficient, but effectiveness is a different story. You can be moving fast and still going nowhere. You can be checking off every goal on your list. That's what happens when you pursue success without alignment. Power doesn't come from the noise. It comes from clarity. When you know what matters to you deeply, truly, it changes everything. Your decisions become sharper. Your boundaries become stronger. You stop chasing what's popular and start focusing on what's personal. That's the foundation of a designed life, not one built on default settings, but on deliberate values. And the people who live this way don't wait for motivation. They create systems that move them forward, even when they don't feel like it. It's not about perfection, it's about intention. A life that's designed is not flawless, but it is focused. It's guided by vision, not just by momentum. Most people live reactively. They respond to what's urgent. They put out fires. They manage crises. But those who live with purpose operate differently. They don't react to life. They create it, they define what matters most, and structure their lives around it. They don't chase balance, they pursue alignment. And alignment is what gives birth to peace, power, and progress. Designing your life means becoming the architect of your own experience. It means asking difficult questions and answering them honestly. What do I value more, or comfort, or growth? What do I want to be remembered for? What am I pretending not to know? The answers to those questions are not always convenient, but they are necessary, because without that level of clarity, we drift, and drifting feels easy in the moment, but it's costly in the long run. There is a kind of exhaustion that comes from effort, and a kind that comes from misalignment. The first is rewarding, the second is draining. When you live out of sync, when you believe, you begin to erode your energy. But when your actions reflect your deepest convictions, something powerful happens. You begin to access energy that doesn't run out at 5 p.m. You stop relying on willpower and start tapping into a deeper source. Because now you're not just moving, you're moving with meaning. Most of us don't lack time. We lack clarity, we fill our calendars, but rarely our souls. We say yes out of guilt and no out of fear. We overextend, overcommit, and overlook the things that truly matter: our health, our relationships, our creativity. Because we haven't paused long enough to ask, is this really the life I want? Designing your life means creating space for those questions. It means stopping long enough to reflect, to reset, and to realign. One of the most powerful things you can do is take responsibility for your direction, to say, no one else is going to do this for me, not your boss, not your partner, not the world. This is your work mission, your masterpiece, and no, you won't get it right every day. You'll get distracted, you'll drift, but every morning gives you a chance to return to remember. Matters to recommit to the path you've chosen. Designing your life also means being selective about your inputs, about what you consume, who you surround yourself with, and what ideas you allow to shape your thinking. Because whether we like it or not, environment always wins. The people you spend time with influence your standard for what's possible. The content you digest becomes the story you tell yourself, and the story you tell yourself becomes the life you live. If you want to build a powerful life, you need to build powerful rhythms, daily disciplines, weekly reviews, monthly moments of reflection, not out of obligation, but out of alignment, because systems support freedom, habits create identity, and structure, when driven by purpose, becomes a tool, not a cage. The people who seem the most free are often the most disciplined, not because they love rules, but because they've designed a life that protects their priorities. And priorities must be protected. If you don't schedule your values, they will be scheduled over. If you don't guard your time, it will be taken. And if you don't define your own metrics for success, someone else will define them for you. And you'll end up chasing things you don't even want. Things that look good on paper but feel empty in practice. That's what happens when we drift. That's what happens when we don't design living with purpose and power. Doesn't mean you won't have bad days. It means you know why you're showing up anyway. It means you've made peace with the cost of clarity, because clarity always costs something: comfort. Approval, ease, but it gives you something far more valuable in return. A sense of inner alignment that can't be shaken by outside opinions when you start to design your life with intention. People will notice, not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. You'll move differently, make decisions with a different kind of conviction. Because now you're not just surviving, you're building, and what you're building will reflect what you believe. That's the power of design. It turns invisible values into visible results. So don't wait for life to hand you a blueprint. Hope that purpose will land in your lap. Start where you are.